It's almost Halloween 2013, and we're in downtown Oakland, Jack London Square.
A spot in the Chesapeake where they would anchor, and he'd spend Friday night, Saturday night, and usually be back by Sunday afternoon. And that was a typical pattern from 1936 until Pearl Harbor. So he was on board an awful lot.
Yeah.
This ship meant a lot to him. It was the workload. Hey Rocky, take care now. He was working over 15-hour days during the Depression and the war. They tried to keep his workday down to about 2.5 hours on board the Potomac over weekends, so he could at least recharge his batteries and come back for another week's round. He recruited 12 Filipino stewards from around the fleet to cook his food. It was alluded to in the film, but he didn't much care for the food in the White House. The chefs were supervised by Henrietta Nesbitt, who was a housekeeper who was hired by Eleanor. And Eleanor didn't care a thing about food either. She was so busy doing things that her is the means to, get the energy to continue.
Yeah.
And so Henrietta Nesbitt had all the food cooked very plain, very, very repetitive. And so he really didn't care for it. And since it was Eleanor's arena, he worked around Henrietta Nesbitt. He did that with a lot of people. He wouldn't fire them. He could, but he wouldn't. He'd work around them, and you're looking at how he worked around Henrietta Nesbitt. Those stewards he brought with him to Yalta and to Tehran when he met with Churchill and Stalin. When the war broke out, this ship was too dangerous for him to use along the Atlantic coast because of the German U-boats.
Oh yeah.
And so he took to retreating up to the mountains of what we today call Camp David up in Maryland. They started to remodel a CCC camp there for his use. He had a horrible sinus condition, so he couldn't have air conditioning in the White House. And so to escape the heat and humidity, it's another reason why he was on board here all those weekends. And so he had to have a place to go when the Potomac was no longer in use, and that area in the mountains of Maryland, Mike later named Camp David. So that's a third reason why he was always on board here on weekends, to escape the heat and humidity. Mind the combings here as we go through. On the student cruises, I tell the students this is the principal's office. And this is the commander's quarters. Lieutenant commander or commander was the captain, so to speak, of the ship. The theme is always the old and the new. So we're a historic landmark, and we try and keep it as close as we can to the original as of 1936, but we sail. So we have to make accommodations with the Coast Guard and so forth. So this is where the safe would have been, right here. The heaters would not have been electric. They would have been steam radiators. We had a little boiler down in the engine room. We were able to go to Suisun and cannibalize the mothball fleet there to get the furniture that matched with the photos that we had. And one interesting feature is that frequently they were metal rather than wood. Again, his fear of fire. When we go in the wheelhouse, which is right above us, there's still a silver tube with a cap, a voice tube, that extended through here and went all the way to the pillow of the commander. The railing, the ship is somewhat top heavy. When they added that boat deck, they had to put lead in the keel. And then when we got the ship, they had to remove the original engines. The engines we have are the same type of engines as the originals, but they are about, each engine is about 10 tons lighter. So we lost 20 tons of ballast, and they had to take railroad rails and cut them and weld them to the keel.
That would be darn.
So this keeps the lieutenant commander in, is berth.
Uh-huh.
When we go into the president's cabin, you'll notice the railing is much wider and it extends straight across here. So with his strong upper body, in the morning, with the help of one of those Filipino stewards, he could grab onto that railing and position himself into his wheelchair to begin his day. This is new, obviously. This is to narrate our history cruises. When we go out, we have speakers throughout the ship, and we have a narrator explaining what people are seeing and so forth. So that's a modern PA system. Here's the head for the 3 officers. It's functional, by the way. You need to use it. And then on the other side is another head. We had to convert that over for the ladies. In the president's time, that was for the 54 enlisted men, and it had 2 shower stalls in there. On the weekend cruises, they probably weren't all sailing. They rotated the crew. But when they went down to Florida on fishing trips or up to Hyde Park to visit Mama, all 57 would have been lined up when we boarded.
Sure.
And they would have piped him aboard and run up the presidential flag, and they were all, you know, at the ready. So it must have gotten kind of crowded in that head, you know, on those cruises.
Yeah.
Let's get this. These aren't original ladders. The Coast Guard required that we put these in. The originals are much steeper than this.
Yeah, I remember going on some naval ships, and well, they're practically straight up and down.
Yeah, I'll show you one later that's more like that. This is what I tell the kids is vice principal's country here. These were 2 private cabins for officers and visiting officers and officers in training. We opened them up for flow purposes. So
It's almost like there's a mirror.
yeah, that's right. When you turn this on, it is like that. So these, again, officers in training and visiting officers. These were the permanent officers, the exec and the engineering officer over here. And it's nice to see and hear. You have a good example of the welding and the riveting. Here are the rivets, and then behind us is the welding line right here. So we have both in use here.
Uh-huh.
I always tell people it was Rosie the welder, not Rosie the riveter, but it sounds better, I guess. This is a little didactic on Captain Daniel Callahan, who's a local boy. He was born in San Francisco and grew up here in Oakland. Took the ferry over to St. Ignatius High School with his younger brother. And they enlisted in World War I in the Navy. And he was assigned as the naval aide to the president. And the naval aide's only job description is they're in charge of the presidential yacht. They do what the president wants them to do.
Sure.
And he got very close to Franklin Roosevelt. He lived, his family was in Alameda, and then he was back in the naval yard. And so he slept in one of the guest quarters and lived a bachelor's life on board here while he was a naval aide. When the war loomed on the horizon, he saw his younger brother advancing in the Navy. His brother becomes the first commander of the USS Missouri that received the surrender in Tokyo Harbor.
Yeah.
So he was getting a little antsy,
Sure.
and reluctantly the president let him go, and he commanded the USS San Francisco.
Too bad the president couldn't get him promoted.
Well, he did get him promoted. He entered he was a captain, but he was promoted pretty quickly to vice admiral. Left the San Francisco, but then quickly returned to it as his flagship in the battle off of Guadalcanal, Savo Sea, and in that battle he was killed.
I guess in his present position is what I was thinking.
Upon his death, he was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor posthumously. Here you see a picture of the San Francisco limping back to Mare Island, where it was repaired, and then went out. If you go to Land's End, Point Lobos in San Francisco, there's a monument to him in the San Francisco. Part of the Hall of the San Francisco is on display there. It's a very beautiful site if you've never been there at Land's End.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's well worth seeing. You just go all the way out on Geary and you almost run into it.
Okay.
And now enlisted man's country. The kids love this. And when we sail, the Coast Guard still requires that we have our watertight compartments. So if we were underway, when I opened this up, I hold an alarm here. Otherwise, a buzzer goes off up in the, the pilot house.
Yeah.
We don't have to worry today.
The kids like it, the twist the wheel type thing.
Yeah, you see it in the old submarine movies.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So here's enlisted man's country. During the day, they would stow the bunks against the bulkheads, and down would come 2 tables on a pulley arrangement here, and they would sit from time to time and eat food that was prepared up in the cruise galley. They would sit on their sea chests also, but it was an open mess, so they would also stand up there in the galley and make sandwiches for themselves. If you count all the bunks and you realize how many enlisted men there were, you know they were on 4-hour watches.
Yeah.
And so they're hot bunks.
Yeah.
And yeoman's office, there would have been a Dutch door right here, because right through there was a supply room, and they would order stuff from the PX or whatever, and he would distribute out of here amongst other things.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he had his own bunk, private, and of course the yeoman's office always can be locked up. You know, because they have documents. Here's the ladder I was referring to. This is where the 12 Filipinos had a section. Okay, and then there were other Caucasian sailors in there too. We don't know how they segregated them, but you know, on ships, you can't take that to the extreme.
Things are pretty tight.
More like this. This leads to the booby hatch, right here.
Oh yeah.
And that's more like what it was in terms of. And then the anchors are stowed forward of that bulkhead right there. We don't use them. We use bow lines, you know, to tie up. But there was at one time stowed in there a 50 caliber water-cooled machine gun that was mounted. There were 2 of these doghouses originally. Actually, there were 5. There were 3 in the stern also, but they took one of them out, and the mount for there was a 3-inch, I think it was 3-inch cannon on the original Electra, the Coast Guard.
This is when it was used as a Coast Guard.
Here's the mount. Yeah, when it was a Coast Guard. Here's the mount. There's a missing pole here, but you can see the weight had to be sustained by these poles. Well, that mount was replaced by a 50 caliber machine gun, and they'd pull it out, you know, through the hatch forward here, and they'd practice now and again. The movie gives the impression that, you know, they're marching around there all the time. Well, he came here to relax, so they're not present all over. And they get near the shore. I guess there would have been a Secret Service presence of some sort, but not like the film kind of would lead you to believe.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn lights out as we go here, because we're probably not going to have more people come through.
Yeah.
And then I tell the kids you can't just throw your clothes around, right? According to regulation.
Sure.
And then I love this. Here's remember how steep that is. So it's going to be like this here.
Yeah.
And here's your swing bar right here.
Oh yeah.
So the last couple of stairs, as they go down, they grab it.
Drop in.
Drop in. They were agile, those young guys.
Oh,
remember when we were?
Yeah. Those were the days, huh?
So with the old and the new thing, Coast Guard requires us to stow the life preservers in here, but this is where the blocks of ice were inserted. It was the ice box, if you will, for the oysters and pheasant and grouse, all the good stuff he couldn't get in the White House. Stowed in there until the Filipino stewards could work their magic on it.
Yeah.
Fuel comes in, we usually go to Santa Fe Channel in Richmond, which is just past shipyard number 3. And we put in, about 6 weeks ago, we put in 4,400 gallons. The bill was $16,000 for the diesel. We run about 30 gallons an hour when we're cruising. Cruising about 12 knots, 11 knots.
Doesn't sound bad to me.
Yeah, well, we're not going that fast.
Okay.
But it still is $175 an hour just
Yeah.
for fuel. Radio room. So ship to shore. They're drying stuff out. The work crew works on Monday and Tuesday, so I usually have to clean up behind them. They're cleaning. Ship to shore radio and then mail planes would land, and one of the Chris Craft boats would go out and pick up mail pouches and sort through them, trying to keep his workday down to about 2.5 hours.
Even on the weekends?
On weekends.
Uh-huh.
During the week, he's working over a 15-hour day.
Yeah.
Fuel tanks are right here.
Oh,
So
okay.
the T, you open them up, and the engineer, before we go out, as part of his routine, comes over here and gets down on his hands and knees, and the engines aren't on. He drops them down and listens, and there's kind of a very, very,
Uh-huh.
and then he, pencil and paper, he measures and notes the volume of air above the fuel line. So we know how much fuel we have. It's the old way, and that's the way they do it now.
Yep.
So, among other things, they'll be in contact from the engine room. Oh, to give you an idea of the size of the engines, look at this. Here's a piston for a Mazda truck,
Okay.
and here's a piston from one of our
Oh, wow.
tugboat
Yeah.
engines. So they're Enterprise engines built in 1943.
And how many cylinders?
They're 6 in each.
Okay.
Watch yourself coming down the counter.
Uh-huh.
These are independent engines. They are direct drive, water-cooled engines, reversing engines. So there's no transmission in them. When the engines are on, the prop's turning. So here are the controls.
There's no clutch at all?
There's no transmission at all.
Wow.
So here you have, if you look here, you can see the control for that engine right there. See the chrome, the silver with
Sure.
the handle.
Uh-huh.
And then here's the one for this engine right here.
Uh-huh.
So the engineer starts these engines up from down here, and then he's in communication. If you drop down, you can just barely see the sound-powered phone. Are you really interested in engines
Yes.
and stuff? Well, let's go below then so you can see all of that. Just watch your...
Yeah.
Everything seems to be fairly cleaned up from yesterday. They were working in here yesterday. Yeah, they got it pretty clean. The earmuffs that you saw coming in are because of this. There are 2 generators,
Uh-huh.
and this is a 6-cylinder, I believe it's a 6-cylinder diesel generator, as loud as can be. So that's where the noise comes from.
Yeah.
So here are the compressed air tanks. There are 4 of them, 2 on the starboard and 2 on the 2 on the port and 2 on the starboard.
And that would be used to start the engines?
Yeah, they're reserve tanks that the air signal comes in from them. Let's go to the controls. You feel that there's a keel warmer. I mean, an engine warmer. You feel it?
Sure.
That reduces the wear and tear on the engines when they start them up.
Uh-huh.
They warm them up for about 6 minutes here. They start the engines here, and here's the sound-powered phone that I was referring to. So you crank it, and the bell goes off up in the wheelhouse, and the captain responds. And even if our generators are out, it generates its own current. So you speak into the phone, and there's a voice box, and it generates its own current, and you can, if our generators go out, you can still communicate. There's one in the steering gear compartment also where the rudder is.
That would be for emergency steering. then, and then,
Well, but preliminary, before we go out, not only are they warming the engines up and checking the fire pump over here, bringing bay water in and shooting it out to make sure it functions, but they go down in the steering gear compartment to check the movement of the rudder. And so they need the phone so that what he sees on his gauge up in the pilot house is the same as what the readings are for the rudder there.
Yeah.
They also check the hydraulic pumps there
Uh-huh.
for the fluid levels and
Yeah.
so forth. So when he backs out of here, this goes to this position here, and you hear this psh, and the air signal it comes in here, and don't ask me how, but it starts the power stroke. Okay, and where that big piston you saw starts coming down and pressing and heating up the volume of air below. And now here you have little pumps that here for each cylinder, and they're governed by this apparatus here, which times the firing and the richness of the amount of fuel going in and so forth. By the what happens then is he backs out. So when it goes to this position, it'll say reverse.
uh-huh,
And we back out, and then he has to go back up here on each engine and come to, by now, by the way, all of the control over the engines has been diverted to the pilot house under Coast Guard regulation. So in the old days, it all would have been down here through communicating with an EOT, where you throw it at half speed and the
Yeah,
bell goes
yeah.
off down here and you answer it. And
Typical
it goes
movie
up
stuff.
there. Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go. That EOT is gone, and what you have is you have the controls up there. So when you turn this, the engines answer not to these controls, but to the ones up in the pilot house.
okay,
So once we're underway, and the pilot and he moves us out, he then moves his controls to this position, and we come to a full engine stop. And then when he goes to the forward control, again the air signal is brought in, but the whole camshaft slides, and the order of the firing is reversed, and we go forward.
I'll be darned.
And in case that doesn't work, here's the cheater, okay, where you put a piece of wood in there, you can throw the
Move that
camshaft
camshaft, yeah.
manually, right?
Sounds like a hard way of doing it. Why don't you put a clutch in it? Or a
Well,
gear?
and I don't know why but that was a typical
Okay,
thing. These are World War II tugboat engines,
Yeah.
and they were built the same way,
all right.
direct drive. But it means when we come in, you better really know what you're doing. You have to judge
Yeah.
the wind and the tide,
Precisely.
and you can't suddenly go into reverse. and
Exactly, my
stabilize.
thinking, yeah.
So you have to really know what you're doing.
Well, no wonder they paid those captains so much. Huh?
Yeah, this guy, ours makes $42 an hour.
There you go.
Over here is the mentioned the fire pump. Here are the other storage tanks. Here's the fire pump right here, and that's our bilge pump, which we never use unless we're sinking, because it would violate EPA regulations. We siphon out periodically. We sound down there, and then we siphon out any buildup of water, and I think we run it through our toilets, and then we hook up and just flush it out, which is okay.
Yeah.
And we're limited to 300 hours
Okay.
of sailing because we're burning the diesel, and there are all kinds of environmental restrictions
okay.
and so forth. But we seem to be able to get in enough cruises to keep going
Yeah.
under 300 hours.
Is that 300 hours a year?
We sail from April until about now.
The season,
mid-November.
okay.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
For a short time, they had air-started semi-trucks, diesel semi-trucks.
Yes.
It's the first time I ran into an compressed air starting mechanism.
This is the one of two emergency escape hatches. That leads to the boat deck.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then that ladder there is another escape hatch right here that you
Uh-huh.
see as you go out. Coast Guard requires the CO2 canisters that you see out here, these red canisters. So the engineer gets out one way or the other, and then they hit this. It's a 32-second time delay, and then well,
Just
the
completely
CO2 just floods in there.
Yeah.
Puts it out. So now we can go to the president's territory.
All right.
There's a cruise galley. We can just peek in real quick. Cruise galley's over here. So you can just see about the size of it. Of course, it would have been oil burning stoves, not electric, none of that stuff. And,
So all the cruise food was prepared here.
right, and no refrigerator. Again, they used those compartments with blocks of ice. The old ice box that I remember when I was really young. And then the Filipino stewards worked in a separate galley over here, cooking the food for the president, his guests, and the officers.
Uh-huh.
So that's what this looks like. About the same size.
Separate but equal, huh?
Well, I don't think the food was equal. They all eat scrambled eggs when they came home on Sunday evening. But other than that, no, I think the cooking was a little bit better on this side.
Yeah.
So that door would be closed, and if you just glance in here, here's the saloon, the formal dining area. And that's the original ship's bell that you see right there.
Oh,
we have
yeah.
it down here for safekeeping. There's a red button right next to it. There's one in the president's cabin and in all the guest cabins. And when that button is pressed, this is the behind you is the annunciator right here. So if you look at it, I'll show you. Let me press it. And the door would open, and the steward would know to come in here to receive the order for the bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich, or whatever was wanted in here.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you've ever watched Downton Abbey, it's like Downton Abbey without the bells.
Yeah,
you know? And this is the saloon.
I'm sorry, this is the...
So obviously formal dining. In private moments, he'd work on his stamp collection here. He'd sit with Sam Rosamond and write speeches. He wrote his own speeches. He would he'd broadcast a national radio address from this room, patched through the radio room where you
Fireside chats.
Well, it wasn't a fireside chat, but it was one. It was a
Okay.
major address.
Yeah, okay.
And it had to do with our growing involvement in the war in Europe, and it's like, this is no time to relax, is essentially what he's saying. Even though I'm relaxing on board this little ship, don't forget, we can't really relax.
Yeah.
Right? This is the original china cabinet. Here it took all kinds of hundreds of hours to restore that. This is from the motion picture The Master, but it looks kind of, and they filmed on board here that movie, and it looks kind of nice, so we've kept it.
Uh-huh.
Through this door right here, remember those generators you saw? The exhaust from those generators used to come through this. This is a smokestack here.
Okay.
And it used to, when they remodeled the ship, they rechanneled that exhaust into the forward stack, and they created a false smokestack. And it's locked up now. It was a dumbwaiter block and pulley arrangement, so he could wheel himself through that door and pull himself up to the boat deck and come bounding out of the smokestack and surprise his guests assembled up there on the boat deck level. To really appreciate this room, though, it's you have to understand that his world is down here
Okay.
from age 39.
Uh-huh.
And people are hovering all around him,
Yeah.
especially in the White House,
Yeah.
all day long. So his major, he fished and did stamps, but his major way of relaxing was starting to mix martinis over here around 5, 6 o'clock. And it was heavy on the vermouth. It's not about the alcohol so much. He didn't drink after dinner, usually. It was about mixing them and doing things for people, because he had been hovered all day.
Okay.
And as he's doing it, he's
have you heard the latest about, or what have you heard? It was the
Yeah.
gossip.
Yeah.
It was the stories that he told. It was the small talk. All stuff that drove Eleanor crazy. She couldn't stand it. So she was rarely on board the Potomac. She knew he needed this place to get away and relax, but she's a missionary, you know,
Sure.
who put shoe leather on her beliefs. I mean,
Yeah.
she was out there doing things, and she just couldn't be cooped up here listening to the chit chat, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for dinner for Eleanor, the food was secondary, and there had to be serious conversation, you know. Well, he could be silly, you know, puns and all this stuff, and she just couldn't stand it.
Yeah.
So rarely on board. So it's the laughter, it's the cigar smoke, it's the poker after dinner, it's what have you heard, and he just light this room up. I mean, so you can't really appreciate what this room meant to him unless you understand the context, what was going on.
Right.
Here's his cabin right here. And here's the railing that I mentioned, you know, that he would grab onto in the mornings and help himself into his wheelchair. His RCA Victor's contribution here. Some of the kids ask what these are.
Vinyl records. Yeah.
Yeah. But, he did love music, but you know, you don't hear a whole lot about his love of what kind of music. So he's more, you know, playing people, right?
Yeah.
Fowler was on board for over a year. You know, he was a gift from his cousin Margaret Suckley, and he slept at the foot of the president's bed in the White House, and he had a little crate on board the Potomac and he was always on board if the president was on board. He's been chewing his basket here, so we're going to have to get it.
Is that the original bed? Not likely, huh?
Not likely. Here's his bathtub. Kind of interesting. Take a look at it. It's not really a bubble bath. It's more for a spitz bath. You know, he would be helped on the railing there, and he would grab onto it and just freshen himself up. Again, he's a naval guy in his own mind. He doesn't need all the fineries.
Yeah.
And it is a pretty Spartan vessel, you know, for a presidential yacht, which suited the Great Depression.
Yeah.
You know, people, if they saw him on the Sequoia, this ritzy yacht, that's one thing. They see him on a gray naval vessel, well, he's the commander-in-chief and so forth, so it was more appropriate, I guess. And now, the great fantail, which we have covered up. It was really chilly on Sunday, a windy, cold day. We had a charter, and we came here to have some drinks afterward when everyone was gone, and the captain put up the canvas, and I see they've left it up in case rain starts.
Yeah.
So here is where he would have sat a great deal. He designed this couch, and you can see why with his useless legs. Right below is the twin rudders, and there's the hatch through which the engineer goes down to check the rudder, as I said.
Oh yeah.
That would have been bulletproof glass running all along here. But
now that's original, or
no, it's no longer bulletproof glass. In fact, they're working constantly to find a coating that won't deteriorate with the salt water and air that we get all during our sailing season.
But it had bulletproof glass
originally. Yeah. Although, you know, for him to stand, he needed 5 pounds of steel on each leg. He was 6'1" and weighed 187, but he would have cleared the railing there. So when they were near the shoreline, there was probably the Secret Service agent stationed about right here, just to make sure that he wasn't helped up, you know, near the shoreline.
Okay.
Because anyway, and this is the type of furniture they had. Wicker, you could move it around. We put our bar arrangement up there when we're out on charter tours, and people, they're catered, and people have drinks here and so forth. So it's very, very functional. So the wicker furniture you saw in there would not have been in there. It was a little nicer in the saloon. They had leather chairs and coverings, but still pretty plain, you know, for a president, at least by our standards today.
Yeah. Now, what would it cost to charter this vessel?
I think we have to go out for a minimum of 2 to 3 hours, so I think it starts around $16,000 to charter. It's a costly deal, but because you have the caterers and the
Yeah,
cost of
sure.
the food and all. It depends on the size. I mean, Marty can cost it out, for you. We have weddings. I mean, it's.
I was thinking of a weekly rate. Do you have a weekly rate?
Oh yeah, when you go out like on
I'm only kidding.
on a history cruise, it's like $50 to go out for a couple of hours. It's
All
very
right.
nice.
Yeah.
The king and queen you saw in the film, that's George VI of the King's Speech, and the Queen Mom came right down here, and Eleanor was on board for that.
Okay.
And they greeted them here in the fantail. But it was very hot. They had all kinds of luggage and no air conditioning for reasons
Sure.
I mentioned. So, and if you look at the corridors we're going to look at now that they would have stayed in, it probably didn't measure up to European standards.
Yeah.
Right? So, well, you can check that out for yourself in a minute.
All right.
That wasn't original. It's nice, but that's where the emergency till would have been fitted in to a
Oh, okay.
notch there, and the till was stored below. And so if the cables connecting to the wheel broke, they could bring that till up, and a couple of sailors block and pulley down there to
Sure.
manually steer.
Okay. So we got the presidential seal here
Yeah.
now. Okay.
Well, you want to check the guest quarters?
Sure.
I mean, look here, they even used the scuttlebutt hatch here for serving. Space
Oh, yeah.
was at a premium then, just as it is now. And there he is lounging on the... Did you want to have a photo there on there?
No, that's fine.
You're okay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's go below. I don't know if you noticed in the cruise quarters, but there are electric motors on the boat deck that drive fresh air down when we're underway, down below.
Uh-huh.
But they're very noticeable in the guest quarters because they're bigger.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That ladder wouldn't have been here in the president's time. We had to put it in for Coast Guard regulations. What was here was a single guest cabin, just like this one.
Sure.
So there was a hallway here, and
Yeah.
here's what it looked like.
So
So
the
there
queen.
were two singles,
Okay.
and there's a shower there on the left.
So the Queen of England would have slept in a room like
Well, they're doubles. I'll show you theirs. But
Okay.
this is a single, and this is a single.
Uh-huh.
Captain Callahan may have used either one of these
Uh-huh.
when he was aboard. Here's where the king and queen would have stayed. There are two doubles, and this is the one with the tub. I want to make it look a little bit nicer for you. I don't know why they don't turn lights on when they open this ship. It just bugs me. I want this to look nice when people come in here.
Oh, it's got a regular bathtub.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, pretty austere for
It is, and it's a split decision for Americans. A lot of them, when I mentioned, this is 1936 it's been restored to. By 39, when the king and queen arrived, there were coverings on the bulkheads and carpet in here. So it was a little bit nicer. And even then, I'd say 75% of the Americans I bring down here say, oh, this would have been all right for one night. This is kind of nice.
Sure.
I haven't brought a European down here yet who thought that it would be even good enough for one night
Yeah.
for the king and queen. So we're still very different from the
Yeah.
Europeans, I think. So two singles, a double, and then here's another double over here. So 6 overnight guests. This one just has a shower though, doesn't have the tub.
So it's a 3/4 bath.
Yeah, yeah. So it's very similar, except that you don't have the, you just have the shower.
Uh-huh.
But there's room in there. It's not like the modern, it's not like a sub, or for that matter, cruise ships.
A cruise ship.
Cruise ships are pretty crowded. There's
Yeah.
even room to move around in there.
That's exactly what it crossed my mind as I walked into this room, that it's
Yeah.
compared to the cruise ships of today,
Right.
at least the cabins I've been in, that I can afford.
Increasingly, the kids don't know what that is, which
Yeah.
is kind of nice. You know, his wheelchair bore no resemblance to the one we have in our office. It was a cut-down kitchen chair, and there's a picture of it in there. But he would ride up above the wheels, and so it was very maneuverable and narrow. It had no armrest, but it had an ashtray for the 2 packs
Sure.
of Camels a day. that he
Yeah.
smoked. So 6 overnight guests. Let's go all the way up to the boat deck. So this ladder was here, but that ladder you see right there was forward. It was right here.
Uh-huh.
And there was a hallway here, so guests could walk right into the fantail without going through his cabin.
Of course.
So boat deck. Here are the motors I was referring to drive the fresh air below.
Sure.
That's where he would come bounding out to greet his guests in the fantail.
That's a great story.
Yeah, and then here's it. These are the Chris Craft boats. This is mahogany. It's just been refurbished
Uh-huh.
by a guy named Mike Torrey, who's a volunteer woodworking guy. There's a pedestal right in here and a swivel chair, so they'd lower him down into the water with crew, and he'd go out fishing.
Oh,
Off these
okay.
boats.
So he used it fairly regularly.
Yes, yes. So mail pouches and fishing.
Is this the actual boat?
No, they're donated. They're the same type. They're Chris Craft boats, identical to his,
Uh-huh.
but the originals have been lost.
Okay.
And then compromises the old and the new. This is what the original lifeboats were like. They were whale boats. One here, and there were 2 here.
Uh-huh.
The Coast Guard requires that we have that lifeboat right there. So 2 man overboard and 2 crew members lower the Jacob's ladder and go down it, while 2 lower this, and then the 2 down there waiting get in and out they go.
Uh-huh.
Good luck with our current on the
Yeah,
bank.
yeah.
And then the modern life rafts. Here's where the emergency escape hatch leads to that you saw, that ladder.
Oh, yeah.
Coast Guard requires 2 Zodiacs. When this one opens up, it sees 50. And when this one over here opens up, it sees another 50.
So you could have got life rafts for 100 people.
Yeah. Again, the motors for the fresh air.
Uh-huh.
Emergency generator.
All right.
And then the wheelhouse, where we end up. These are the original teak doors here. So the doors here are original. This is the original compass and binnacle. This is an astounding thing. Remember?
Oh, yeah.
I had the privilege of being on board a couple of weeks ago when they turned the compass, swung the compass it's called. So they have a captain with a GPS system over here calling out points on the compass, and another captain over here swinging the ship.
Okay.
And Archie, 84-year-old guy, opens the binnacle up, and there's a little crank in there. And he inserts it into a gear system, and as he cranks it, he can move the metal plates up and down. And when they call the points off here, this housing is taken off, and he's reading the compass reading. And as he marks it, he adjusts it, but he can't get it exactly right. So here are Archie's deviations.
Oh,
See
yeah.
Archie McFowle?
Uh-huh.
That's how much it's off at each major point.
Okay.
And so if we lose all our modern equipment, our original compass in the fog will at least tell us what direction we're in.
Now the metal that he adjusts in there is to bring the compass at least as close as he can to get it true.
That's and I don't know enough about it, but that's a certain kind of magnetic field that he's adjusting for.
Ah,
The other field is adjusted with the iron balls. And how that's done, I have no idea. But
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
only one guy who knows how to do this, and that's Archie. He
Yeah.
comes and he takes care of it so we can continue to use our original compass and binnacle.
yeah. I didn't know that there was two different adjustments.
Mm-hmm.
I knew the balls, the large balls, are
Right.
pretty obvious.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, but
Yeah, this is the original helm stanchion, and it would have been connected to cables, again, that ran all the way to the stern where the rudders are. Today we have two independent hydraulic systems. This is the one like your car. So there are two hydraulic pumps. We only use one of them at a time in the stern, in the steering gear compartment. And they check the fluid levels there before we go out. They check the rudder and so forth. And so this, you can either use this or you throw the switch here to the port side, rather to the starboard side, and now the rudder will answer to this joystick right here.
oh,
Again, hydraulic, just like this is.
okay.
But if one is conked out, the other one we
Yeah.
would hope would be in use. Again, the controls for the engines are up here. This is where the EOT would have stood, right here, right, full speed forward.
Yeah,
Ding
yeah.
ding, and here's your sound power telephone.
Oh yeah.
Spotlights,
Okay.
and so on.
It's interesting to watch the huge container ships being steered by something just
yeah, but they
this
have
simple.
they have bow thrusters though.
Sure.
We don't.
Yeah.
Again, when he comes in here, my right foot's going. Oh,
I
my
know,
God, oh my
yeah.
God! Oh my God!
Yeah.
And then the charts that are still, I mean, we have sonar, but it only gives us readings right in front of us.
Ah.
And so if we're going, the channel, the bay is only 12 feet deep on average.
Oh, okay.
And this is the shallow, blue.
Okay.
So it's 300 feet at the gate, but, we have to dredge. The Army Corps dredges 50 feet deep, 11 miles beyond the gate, so these big guys can get home here and
Yeah.
here and go back out. And then there's another channel going to Richmond and Stockton.
Okay.
Constantly dredged to 50 feet deep.
I would think so now. How far inland is Stockton?
Oh, that's way up the Sacramento River.
I know it's quite a ways, yeah.
past on
50
you
miles
you can go
or-
to Sacramento and you can go to Stockton. I'm not sure. Well, I'll have to check what the distance is, but seemingly a long journey. So a
It's
bar pilot has to be on board
Sure.
conducting them, just as they do to get in.
Yeah. It's always kind of mind-boggling to see ocean-going vessels in Stockton.
I know, yeah, or Sacramento.
Yeah.
for that matter. Yeah, it's true. And that's the Potomac. These are navigation platforms for sighted compasses in the old days.
Okay.
Here's your doghouse or booby hatch. Remember the steep ladder that we saw from the
Yep.
crew's quarters? And then that's the windlass that is not used for our anchors, but for tending the bow line.
So you don't
So-
even have any anchors?
We have them, but we just don't use them. We tie up here.
Could you can use them though,
Yeah,
if you had to.
yeah, that windlass would
Okay.
do them. You see the chains there that are
Yeah.
attached. Essentially, he glides in close enough, hopefully, with the wind and tide, to where one of the crew people can take the pole and lean over the railing and grab that hawser right there,
Uh-huh.
which is draped over when we leave, we drape it over that wooden peg.
Okay.
So you have to be close enough to reach it with that line, thread it through there and get it on that bed. And then we have snap lines right here at midship, and we have stern lines, of course, that tie up. So the final deal is they thread, they reach over and they grab with a hook, they grab that bow line there, thread it through the forward hull,
Okay.
and then wind it onto the windlass.
Oh yeah.
Turn the windlass on, and it will just true the ship enough so that when you walk off in a moment, the gangplank's right there. And that's the Potomac.
Now what is a hawser?
That's a big rope.
A big rope.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a naval term for
It's
a rope,
It's a
huh?
naval like head, right? Or ladder, not stairs.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Well, glad you could come today.
Yeah, this
Glad
was
we
great.
Got it in.